Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Kathy Fitzmaurice from the Central Office, and I will be your host for today's webinar, 2016 Trends Report on the Food Industry. Your microphones and telephones are currently muted to eliminate background noise during the program. We will take questions at the end of the presentation. To ask a question, type it into the question box on your control panel, or if you have a working microphone, you may raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon and I'll unmute you. Today's program is being recorded and will be available through WebMQS in the Shared Resources section. So let's get started. I'm very pleased to introduce Karen Livingston, Senior Business Advisor from our Onondaga SBDC. Welcome, Karen.
Thanks, Kathy. Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to share research that was done in our center regarding food trends. So we got a nice, light, fun topic. And really, this kind of grew for me off of the fact that I am a foodie. And so some trends caught me and caught my attention when I was out at the America's SBDC conference out in San Francisco last year, so the 2015 conference. And so it's kind of caught my attention, and then so I've done a bit of an update on that. So that's what we're going to go over today. For those of you that are still kind of meats and potatoes guys, I'm going to turn it a little bit on its head with the trends that are kind of going on now. But hopefully you'll go along for the ride with us. So as you would expect, changes in consumer eating habits are having a profound influence on the food industry. So throughout the U.S., more and more consumers are labeling themselves not as calorie counters or being on a diet, but rather looking to eat kind of clean, pure, and wholesome foods. So, you know, like dark chocolate. So this is really what people now consider a lifestyle, rather than something that's a little more short-term focused, like a diet, where you are trying to achieve something short-term like weight loss. So moving away from the traditional American diet that's received a lot of press and documentaries, including ones that you might have seen or heard about, such as Forks Over Knives, Super Size Me, and then more recently, someone brought to my attention Unsuper Size Me. And over the past years, it's also spawned a lot of cookbooks out there. So there's been a lot of opportunity for people to jump in here and create some good businesses. And there's no doubt that calorie counting requires commitment. But as we go through this, you're going to see that so do a lot of these new eating trends. But people have built them into their lifestyles, and we're starting to see labels centering around some of these eating trends out there to make it easier for people to pick up these foods on, you know, because everyone's busy these days, right? And so you'll see gluten-free labeled on a lot of things, whether or not it inherently even had gluten. You'll see that label kind of show up on things from bath products to food. And now paleo also you see. And so that's one of the eating trends that we'll kind of look at here first. So amongst all others, some of the current eating habits are going to include paleo, right? And so here we're talking also known as caveman or the Stone Age diet. And really this is based mainly on foods that were presumed to have been available to our Paleolithic humans. So what are we talking? We're talking around the time of stone tools being created and humans coming into small societies, and they are presumed, right, to subsist on gathering plants and fishing and hunting or scavenging wild animals, right? So those things you see, you go to the History Museum and you look at our ancestors, well, that's kind of the school of thought here as well. What they ate is probably what we should be eating. Maybe this is what nature intended. But us being modern age, each person chooses to define this slightly differently. But it's mainly based on eating vegetables, fruits, nuts, roots, meat, and yes, indeed, organ meats, while excluding things such as dairy products, grains, sugars, processed oil, alcohol, and coffee. And then people get funny and, you know, and draw the line in the sand a little bit differently. Some say, yes, you know, honey's okay. I'm sure our ancestors ate that. They went up and, you know, into those trees and got that. So, and others, well, not so much. So then another one that we're seeing out there, and I think we've seen before, is Mediterranean, right? And this was fairly big probably 15 years ago. There were a lot of cookbooks and everything coming out about it. And it's really having another resurgence. And it's characterized by eating based on the traditional foods and drinks of the countries around the Mediterranean Sea, right? So with wine in moderation with meals. And again, a lot of this goes back, and we're going to see how these all kind of have commonalities, but certainly health is an issue, right? And looking in areas in the world where populations are healthier than maybe in other places. So then we'll move on to another eating trend that's going on out there is bulletproof. I don't know if you guys have run into this, but there was a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, and he said, well, you know what, it is not about the quality of fat you eat, it's about the quantity. So it's all of, that all popular MCT oil and grass-fed butter and coffee, that kind of gives you an idea of kind of the bulletproof base, right? And I tried it. I was actually out in Laguna Beach, and I happened to go by a local bike shop, and it had turned part cafe to fuel cyclists. Very active out there, right? And I got to say, it was pretty tasty. I can't imagine the calories I consumed in one cup of coffee with that in it, but it was pretty tasty. So the main idea behind Bulletproof is to get people are looking to get 50 or 60% of their daily calories from healthy fats. So people are looking at coconut oil, avocado oils are starting to come out, grass-fed and pastured animals. And then a little bit, they're still incorporating some protein, and then heavy, another 30% in, say, vegetables. So, and that kind of corresponds with plant-based. So be aware, the new rise in herbivorism is no longer about identifying as, say, a vegan or a vegetarian, right? We're getting away from that group and saying, no, this is a lifestyle, right? And it's about a conscious effort to eat more plants, fewer animal products. It's viewed as a sustainable for both personal health and the environment. So this trend towards plant-based eating has been further bolstered, if you've seen this, by the Federal Dietary Guidelines, the Advisory Committee's recommendation that Americans eat less meat. So that's also pushed this trend a little bit along. And finally, the last one I'm just going to bring up is allergy elimination. So we've seen a lot over the past years, right? The gluten intolerance, the celiac disease, people trending towards eating those gluten-free products, and hopefully, and as I've seen, actually, the taste has actually improved. So that's a good thing, because the first products that really came out, right, that was a tough sell because the taste wasn't there. At the root, really, is figuring out if foods are causing inflammation. People are concerned about health again, right, and they're trying to find something other than the conventional American medication to see if they can help themselves. So allergy elimination, people are looking at everything from, an autoimmune arthritis to acne to you name it to see if the underlying food is causing an issue. So the latest figures I have, it was from a 2015 National Restaurant News. It's showing about 33%, so just over a third of Americans have identified as focusing on eating habits. And so then if we drill down within those, right, it was estimated that about 4% are actually following paleo, 18% are cutting carbs, 16% are on high protein, and about 9% are going gluten-free, right? So and these trends are expected to go up. So I mentioned before we're going to look a little bit about the commonalities that kind of underlie all of these things that are kind of coming together. It's almost a bit of a perfect storm because they all do have common themes. So underlying this shift is that Americans are looking to dietary solutions for health problems, as well as seeing nutrition as a core tenet of maintaining health. A focus on gut health is playing a pivotal role as all ages are driven to change their diet with a hopeful look towards health and longevity, right? in society, we don't want to think about, the opposite of that. We want that health and longevity. As long as we can hold on to that, it's a really important piece that makes a lot of things in life easier. So again, this is a lifestyle choice. Folks are looking to adopt healthy overall habits to have a long-term impact on their health versus a diet which has that general short-term focus, like I said, promoting certain outcomes such as weight loss, right? That's a common one. So as such, most of these eating trends result in reducing the amount of sugars and carbs. They are demanding mostly plant-based proteins, and consumers are starting to look at labels, not for the calorie count, but for ingredients. And so right now, the fewer the better, but we'll get to that as I go on. So going over all of these, based on this change in consumer habits, I'm going to go over a list of some trends that you maybe want to be watching or bring up with your clients and consider when they're formulating, say, a new food product or a food-based business, or they need to adjust their current offerings, say like an Italian restaurant that's been really carb-heavy. It's a tough thing, but maybe they're going to be needing to look at something slightly different. So our first trend is going to be alternative, and you will see milks in the quotes there, and flours. This is including but not limited to the non-dairy milks and gluten-free flours. So seed and nut milk, so cashew, almond, coconut, hazelnut, and then most recently banana milk. I don't know how well that'll go, but that's a new thing that they're putting out there, see if consumers take to it. These are starting to flood the marketplace as reports of growing dairy intolerance come in and the questionable safety of soy hit the press. And then on the flours, a lot of these new flours are made from pulses. So let's say chickpeas or lentils, dried beans. And these are replacing the traditional wheat flours. Or in some cases, people are taking a recipe and substituting a certain amount of these new flours in place of their wheat flour. So just trying to reduce their intake of that traditional wheat. And actually, I think you see a lot on the packages. I think that they have picked up on this. They'll tell you kind of what the conversion ratio is and how much you can actually substitute for flour before you really start seeing a difference in texture. So going a step further, sprouted flours then, right? So it's always the next new thing. So sprouted flours are providing the benefits of increased digestibility and higher protein, right? And that's something some of these diets are looking for, as well as reduced glycemic loads. And then they're a good source of fiber. And actually, the World Health Organization designated 2016 as the year of the pulse. So this may help in pushing the pulses is made from flour, but the guess is that it's the influencers out there that kind of pushed quinoa to the forefront that are also going to push these flours to the forefront. Finally, if consumers do purchase milk or other dairy products, they're starting to choose those full-fat varieties because science is supporting the some research that the way dairy is digested, it should be used as a whole food, right? It's meant to be eaten all together and not separated out. So that's made a change as far as those that are still consuming dairy products. And you'll see that both in fluid milk, and you'll also see that in all kinds of different yogurts that are coming out. And then we're going to move on to grass-fed everything. So this trend is basically grass-fed everything, including all dairy, meat, eggs, protein powders, and jerkies. So at the Summer Fancy Food Show, it just took place, I want to say, in June down in New York City. Buyers really saw this as a top trend. They're out there looking for these new food innovations, right? And so a lot of new startups and some small, medium entities that have been in the business for a little bit had product offerings that included grass milk yogurt, grass-fed beef jerky, grass-fed milk lassi, and of course, my favorite, ice cream, but it also has a base of grass-fed milk. A little warning here for consumers, though, is that they're going to have to be careful because there still is no FDA definition. Next, we've got uncommon. So here, the new and the unusual are being seen in all categories, again, so from meat and seafood to produce. This trend is being elevated due to a couple catalysts. The first, I would say, being that consumers are looking for new experiences. They're preferring quality experiences over quantity of stuff. And secondly, is the critical eye that is being shed towards food waste. So when consumers are thinking about experience, they're starting to embrace this idea of mindfulness when it comes to their food. But this involves taking some time to enjoy what they're eating rather than just mindlessly filling up on conventional processed foods. In that, they're paying more attention and looking for experienced foods. So think purple anything, to them, purple potatoes, purple carrots, purple tomatoes, all these new varieties of traditional vegetables. And then on top of that, sophisticated jerkies. So no longer the Slim Jim, but these really nicely well-packaged, probably grass-fed barbecue or whatnot jerkies that are coming out on the market kind of fast and furiously, as well as we've also seen personalized subscriptions. And then when I was talking about the second trend where people are turning this critical eye towards food waste, there's this new resurgence of what is deemed ugly produce. This is just produce that's historically gone unpicked, right? It's just left in the fields. It's also known as cosmetically challenged produce. These foods are actually making it directly to shelves now, as well as providing food manufacturers with new inputs for food products. Right, so this is a great thing because you think about food waste and you always kind of think about the side of, well, people buy all this stuff and throw it out. And now we kind of look on the other side of the coin, and it's amazing the amount of produce that was being left in the fields, unpicked, all this energy put into it, left there. Here it is, something that can go into as an ingredient, but being left there. So food manufacturers are developing products such as sauces for this historically wasted produce, which used to be deemed unsaleable due to these minor imperfections. And I think the estimate out there is, 1 in 5 vegetables don't make the grade during harvest time to fit the conventional grocery store standards. If anyone, I don't know if anyone has seen this in the news, but actually Walmart picked up on this trend. And they recently started carrying produce in its stores, right, this ugly produce. You can kind of see the picture of some of the examples down there in the right-hand corner where things aren't exactly as you would expect, right? There's also subscription services that are popping up. So we've seen the CSA, the community-supported agriculture, those boxes grow over the years and take on new things. Well, here's a new thing that they've actually taken on. They're actually doing CSA-style boxes filled with ugly produce. So the food industry, also outside of produce, is seeing cuts of meat that once were overlooked becoming more mainstream, right? So this is just another uncommon thing. Getting, to that plate, there is still a little bit of meat being put on plates, but they're cuts that we didn't traditionally think of. That are being more acceptable now. Oh, let's talk about local, right? So locavorism has been hot for a while due to the increasing awareness of how food miles impact the environment. But now this movement is increasingly influenced by the appeal of the concept of eating as our ancestors did, simply and seasonally. Again, as consumers move more towards experience and less towards stuff, it also plays into the idea of eating in season, being about the pleasure of the moment. However, while locavorism has historically helped support the sales from farmer to consumer at the farm markets, these direct sales are actually on the decline this year. This year, farmers are experiencing fewer people buying produce directly at the market from them. the time and willingness to cook at home has really started to evaporate. So while consumers still want the benefits of local goods, they're really now switching to buying many of these local items via prepared food. And we see markets are changing to more meeting and social gathering spaces over prepared foods. And so farmers still have somebody to sell to, but instead of selling directly to the consumer, they're tending to sell more to the food vendors that are popping up within these farm markets. So a little bit of a change there. Farmers were pretty surprised this year to see this, especially when they had really come to depend on some pretty good sales at farm markets. So there we go, less direct produce, more prepared food. And you can kind of see the food booths over there and then some of the products that are traditionally that we've found at the farm market direct to consumer. This is a fun one. I can only go so spicy, but boy, they call it the sriracha effect, right? So hot sauces and spices are in. It's bolstered a little bit by the increasing awareness of the health benefits associated with eating spicy foods, and it's really pushed consumers to embrace them. So you can see in there even Chobani got on the wagon, right? So we've got Chipotle pineapple yogurt, we've got sriracha mango. I haven't tried either one of them. I'm kind of intrigued. So this is a new one that's out there though. Ghost pepper is very hot. And then we get to something else. We get to clean labeling. And you can see I left this slide pretty blank. With this trend, we're thinking of the word no. So as in no preservatives, no additives, no growth hormones, no artificial ingredients, right? It kind of goes on and on. Recently, manufacturers are consistently changing and announcing their changes to fewer ingredients even in their legacy products. So Kraft mac and cheese made the news, where they're taking out all of their artificial ingredients, whether it being colors or other additives in there, and have rebranded it and brought it back to the public. So they still have their legacy product, but with a lot fewer ingredients, and generally ingredients that people actually know what those ingredients are. And they don't have to go to the web to find out what this long ingredient name is. I think also what I'm starting to see, and you can kind of see it in this Haagen-Dazs, is where they're starting to get away from the word no, right? It's kind of a negative term. But they're saying instead, they're touting the few number of ingredients that are in the product. So Haagen-Dazs here has 5, or things will say only 4 ingredients, which you can print out. So I think marketing is changing, if they can, a little bit from saying, no, 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 but saying, look, we only have X number, and you know what they are. This is probably good for you, better for you. Next trend I saw were dealing with proteins, right? So when we looked at commonalities, protein on the plate is a concern for people. But we're looking here, the trend is really alternative proteins, and especially these plant-based proteins. So quinoa's been out a lot in the news, flax, pea, chia, they're all still in demand. At the Winter Fancy Food Show down in New York City again, there were snacks made from everything with cricket flour to hemp flour to pastas being reformulated not from wheat sources, but from things such as edamame. And those are becoming popular, and more you see them stocked on the shelves. And then coming on the radar are both insects and algae as sources of alternative proteins. So you can see here there was a taste review, a taste-off between 2 cricket flour protein bars. I didn't even realize that many cricket flour protein bars existed, but here we go. So let's go to one that everyone has seen for quite a while, pretty used to seeing, but it's organic and natural, right? So natural still doesn't have a definition, but the natural and organic food category continues to garner growth and support. The pushback on GMOs, which is playing out in the US, plays into this trend. An increasing number of products are being labeled by the manufacturer as GMO-free, regardless of the lack of regulation requiring them to do so. So people may have seen when they're grocery shopping, you see kind of that little picture that looks like a monarch butterfly. It says GMO-free. And you've got products out there that are self-labeling themselves to try and reach out to these consumer groups, regardless of the fact that they're not required to from a higher regulatory body. And actually, Kashi just came out recently. They are doing a program with farmers where they're doing a transitional wheat program. So they're doing cereals that are made out of transitional wheat because it takes 3 years, right, to transition over from a conventional farm to an organic farm. And they realized that the market out there was making it tough for them to obtain all organic ingredients. And so they've created a whole new category out there for this transitional organic. So they have a marketplace now for it, and they can market it that way, and they don't have to have it as conventional for those 3 years, right? They've come up with this whole new term for it, as well as a whole labeling scheme for it. So those are the trends that I saw, as I looked out across. I kind of looked at what was going on last year, and I looked out across news articles and feedback from buyers that are going out and doing, finding these new entrepreneurial ventures that are coming up with some pretty neat and innovative products, right? So here, so then let's think about market opportunities, right? So all this stuff is going on. So there's the opportunity for restaurant offerings to switch up a little bit, right? So with the reduction in carbs, we're really thinking, well, do I really bring out that basket of bread right at the beginning and serve it with meals? Do I need to offer gluten-free items, right? And we see a lot of even pizza parlors now. Gluten-free is a standard option. And some of this stuff may become more and more standard, and people kind of expect to have, say, even now, vegetarian option. It's usually pretty standard on a menu, right? The menus are changing. And then small ventures are doing all this product innovation. They're coming up with some pretty neat new food models and food inventions, and they are getting snapped up by the larger companies. There's a huge spree of purchases out there of large brands kind of snapping up these smaller ventures. And there also, within there are some partnerships. So there was a place called Suja. It's a cold pressed juice. It's out from San Diego. And if you shopped in Target or probably Wegmans, you've probably seen this on the shelves. But what they did is they had a partnership with Coca-Cola for their bottling and distribution. And actually, the other day, I just came across yesterday, there was an article out in the Chicago Tribune, and the headline reads, "As taste shift, big food devours small, health-focused companies to survive." Right, so there's all of this spree of pulling in these smaller companies to bolster the traditional offerings of some of these large companies. And even Danone, I think it was a couple months ago, they purchased White Wave, which is actually an entrepreneur. He's been around a while, right? So back in late 70s, out in Boulder, came up with alternative milks and has grown that company. And White Wave actually just purchased them for, or I'm sorry, Danone actually just purchased them for a good $10 billion. So pretty good chunk of change. A long time coming, but they had those entrepreneurial roots. And so these big food giants, kind of known for processed foods, are starting to see that these categories are really kind of the next thing coming, and they need to go in that route. So young companies that are kind of successfully catering to this fast-growing market of health-focused consumers are having the potential, even within 5 years of startup, being bought out and kind of being brought under this bigger umbrella. So those are kind of the market opportunities I've seen out there based on what's going on in trends in the marketplace. So I'm going to open it up now to any questions.
Thanks, Karen. Does anybody have any questions or any comments for Karen? I want to know, Karen, have you ever eaten any cricket powder or cricket flour?
That's one I have not tried yet. There are some other things that I have tried. To be honest, I haven't seen them on the shelves. I have a bit of a hesitancy to try them, but I may get there.
I'm tempted, but
um, I did try, there was a group that's actually doing the remainder, so from beer brewing, there's a lot of spent grain left over, and they found there was still nutrition to be found in those grains, and so they're actually making bars out of them. So all those bars you see out on the shelf that used to be Cliff Bar only, and that space grows and grows. Those were actually pretty good. I have tried those.
oh, did they taste like beer?
They had a hoppiness to them for me.
Well, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? All right. Just see it. Lynn Oswald said, I've read that telling your story and what you do in your own community can give you a local feel. People gravitate to stories. Do you see that as the case?
I do. So I think a lot of these smaller entrepreneurial companies that are doing this, they have purpose. And if they actually act on purpose and have that story, I think people really, really like that take on it. Absolutely.
And Beth Reed asks, other than fast food, do you see traditional restaurants putting more nutrition information on menus?
I have had, a recent cafe that I helped open, they don't have the nutrition right up front, but when I asked about something, they had the book right there and were willing to share ingredients, and it had the whole breakdown that you would traditionally see on a nutrition label. They didn't put it on their menu though per se, but when I asked, it was right at hand, and they really knew and were able to answer questions. So I don't know how many of them are actually putting it on the menu. It is a nice thing, right? So when I go to even the Starbucks now and you look in that pastry case and you see the calorie count, it's nice to have there. I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not.
Thank you for that question, Beth. Does anybody have any other questions or any comments, anything they've seen in their markets? Lynn has another comment. Please let everyone know that the food guide is being updated and republished. We stayed away from food trends to avoid the book from becoming dated too quickly. Thank you, Lynn. So again, everyone, the food guide is being updated and republished. Does anyone have anything else to add or to ask? All right, I'm not seeing any more questions or comments coming in, so we'll go ahead and wrap up the webinar. And if anyone does think of anything, you can always reach out to Karen Livingston at our Onondaga SBDC. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And Karen, thank you so much for your presentation.